don't handcuff people. Teach them, train them, coach them, tell them what they're expected to do, hold them accountable, and then support them as best as you possibly can. That's the formula.
I'm curious. So you've got your first book, you've written a second book now. A little bit of history for the listeners. What caused you to write that first book and now the second book that's come out?
Well, I had a 25-year career in financial services and was leading the retail brokerage business for one of the largest banks in the country. Was just named leader of the year. And the bank started struggling and got picked up by Chase. And their culture was something at the time, I understand it's improved substantially, but at the time, it was so repelling that I stayed for 6 months and then figured I just can't do this any longer. It's like I'm not in alignment with how they want to treat people and how they want to drive performance. And so I left. And it was a difficult situation because the day that I left, my wife's sister died. And then 10 days later, another sister died. And then 3 months later, her dad died. My wife went into this deep depression, as you can understand. And then like 6 months later from that, a family friend committed suicide. And my wife was just completely devastated by all of this. And so I was trying to figure out, okay, what's my next move? And I had an insight at the time that I understood an approach to leadership that most people weren't doing. And that if I could explain the practices that I had perfected all those years in financial services, that could be a book. So in the process of writing the book, a friend of mine said to me, and you and I were having this conversation offline, but we both had, very unusual upbringings where we were both kicked out of the house at, 17, 18 years old and had to fend for ourselves. And so this friend of mine called me and he said, you are going to explain why these practices work. If you're saying that you're doing things that are very different than most leaders, then why would anybody buy into doing those unless you can prove to them that they're going to work for them? And his language, he said, otherwise people are going to think you need a shitty childhood in order to lead like this. And it was like, the last dimension of your show is spiritual. It was like a Buddha coming to me and saying, you're not done with the book. The next step here is you're going to have to do more work. And so I knew instantly that I had never given it any thought. I did think people would just take me at my word. And he's like, they're not going to. Nobody knows who the hell you are. And like on and on and on it went. So I spent over a year going to look to see if there was evidence to support what I was saying. And the first thing I found was that people are miserable at work and the reasons that they were miserable at work, and everything was lined up for what I was going to be advocating for in these 4 practices. But the biggest thing that happened for me was in that conversation that his name was Doug Jackson. And he said, you're going to have to figure out what was going on inside of people that made them perform for you like that. Because he knew that they did. Like he observed it. We've been peers for a long time. And I ended up taking over a big part of his business because people thought that he wasn't doing enough with it. And I transformed it. And he was very gracious about it. It's like, I don't know what you just did there, but it's pretty amazing because I couldn't do that. So he said, you have to figure it out. And what I figured out, Lee, was that I had this instinct that I think I was affecting the hearts in people. Like I was affecting people so profoundly that this is what made them scale mountains for me. So I had this moment of euphoria, which is like, who wouldn't want to believe that you were having that kind of an impact on people that consistently, right? But then it went from here to here instantly because I'm thinking the minute I start telling people who I used to work with that, we need to lead with more heart, they're going to go, did you have a mental breakdown or a spiritual transformation, or are you a religious nut now? Like everybody was just going to go, you don't bring heart into leadership. But I found science that validated it. I went to a world-class cardio surgeon who ironically had both of her parents die of heart attacks before they were 50, which is what I think motivated her to become a heart surgeon. And I just said, "Is there any possibility that I could have been affecting the hearts in people?" And she said, "You're figuring out something we're just figuring out in science." She said, "I went to medical school. I graduated top of my class, and we were working on hearts for the first time in cadavers. All the students were like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to touch that. That's like, something very special in the human body." And the teachers, medical doctors were coming in and saying, "Don't get caught up in that. This is a carburetor or this is a car part. You're just working on a piece of machinery." And so she said, "That's what we did." So we all believed it. And she said, "But then I went and became, a doctor. And then I got my training to be a cardio surgeon. And I'm starting to work with my patients. And I'm saying, well, Lee, tell me a little bit about you." And so in the conversations, they had major financial problems, horrible marriages, upbringings like we did, all kinds of personal issues. And she said, the common denominator was their biography was driving their biology. And if the heart is a pump, it could never have reacted that way. So she introduced me to an organization called the Institute of HeartMath, which had just begun studying the intelligence of the heart. And they were so intrigued. They were like, "How did you figure this out? Because this is what we're doing." So they shared their science, which has only become more compelling. And basically, what it shows, Lee, is that the heart and mind are working together 24/7. The heart sends more signals to the brain, and feelings and emotions drive human behavior. We're not the rational thinkers that we think we are. Rational beliefs, irrational actions are 5% of our behavior. Feelings and emotions are driving 95% of their behavior. So if you boil it all down, I was making people feel something so deeply, so supportive, so caring that inspired them and motivated them to perform consistently. So once I understood that I had something really meaningful to say, I realized I'm never going back to what I was doing, and this is going to be my life, and that's what it's been ever since.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think directionally it's completely right on. I've always thought about it as heart, head, and gut, and they're all kind of working together. And how do we make the best decisions where everyone wins? So here's the challenge, and it's a bit of a difficult question, I think. And I've listened to, again, a number of your podcasts and experts in the field, and I've worked with a lot of different businesses where the senior leadership team stands up and says, we have this inclusive culture. We're about employee well-being or happiness and all of it. And 90% of the time for the non-supervisory team members, it doesn't feel authentic. It feels like they're being manipulated. And then I think back to my career and all the different businesses and, thousands of employees that I've had over the years in those companies. I never talked about it that way. I just showed up and was that way. And I suspect you were kind of the same. So if you say, "Hey, you can do this, any company can do it, just do these 4 or 5 things," the more we talk about the things and not be those things, the more skeptical our teams are. And so what's the difference? Because I'll say it another way. Uh, we could follow your outline and try to implement this, but there's literally thousands of nuanced ways to respond to keeping on that track when the forces against us are trying to get us off of that, and forces like hidden agendas and all the other stuff that goes with it. Your wisdom is over the top. Uh, let's start a conversation around this topic here, because a lot of leaders want to be able to do this, but they don't have the wisdom to do it. How do they get there faster? I said a lot. So where would you like to go with that?
I don't know that you can get there faster. I don't know that you can get there faster. Um, but it's if you calibrate just this much, people are going to feel it. People are going to go, something different about Lee. And it feels good. I like it. So even if they can't articulate it. So if I can say, well, I've been managing this way my entire career, so I'm over here in terms of understanding, because I have, and I've refined it, and all I'm doing is learning and more validation. And so I'm the complete package, if you will, in terms of understanding how to lead like this. But does that mean that a CEO wakes up and says, "Hey, there's enough evidence here that caring about people has, remarkable returns for us, and that we should be much more supportive of the people that we have instead of treating them as if they're commodities. Like if that's so if you can just say, this is how I want to have our culture change, and you get everybody just making that same move, everybody's going to feel differently. But the thing that you alluded to is that, like, I never went up to people and said, "I'm gonna be really caring for you. I'm gonna look out," right, right? You just you it and the other thing is that if I said to you anything like that, uh, "I'm going to advocate for your well-being." Well, you're looking for it 24/7. So if, one day I don't give you any support, you're gonna go, "Well, that was bullshit." So you set yourself up by making a commitment that you can't keep. And I think a lot of times there's another nuance of what you said, which is this idea of toggling back and forth. So I'm going to be really caring with you, Lee. How you doing today? Tell me about what you'd like to learn. How would you like to grow? Really appreciative for all of your contributions. And then one day I come in and I go, oh, Lee's like nowhere near hitting his goal. So I come in and I go, okay, I'm going to toggle. All this caring stuff isn't working. So I'm going to go, where the hell are you on getting this done? And you're instantly going to go, well, all that caring wasn't true. It was just a manipulation. It was insincere. The moment of truth is when things aren't going well, that you have enough presence, enough self confidence, and enough belief in the people that you're leading, because you hired them and trained them and developed them. That if you sit down and say, okay, Lee, you're struggling. What's going on? Let me help you. What can we do? What resources do you need? What support do you need? I don't come to you and say, suddenly I don't believe you're going to pull it off. I'm saying you are going to be able to pull it off, but something's holding you back. What is it? Let's help. That's a different orientation, right? So I think it's like we want to bring heart into leadership, so we use it as a bolt on. Bring it in when you think it's important. And I'm saying it has to be a full integration. You have to embody this. So it has to be sincere. So don't make a commitment you can't keep. That's the big takeaway here.
If you don't do it at all times, you're just pretending. You're pretending that you care, and you're using it. And I believe in sort of a manipulative way. And if you really do care, even when they can't get the results and it doesn't work out, at least my view is we're very caring even as we're exiting them out of the company. And I've always had a policy actually for decades now where when somebody leaves, the leader they worked for has to stay in touch with them for at least a year after they leave. And the more disgruntled the team members were, they would give them to me, and then I stay in touch with them. And I have folks that, gosh, almost 30 years ago that were let go, that were really disgruntled. We become friends. We still stay in touch today. So to me, that's genuinely caring all all the way through, right?
Completely, right? I mean, I'm not even advocating for that. Like, I mean, you're taking it to like I just want you to take care of the people you have. If you're being that thoughtful, I mean, but it says something about you, but it also says something about what we're really talking about, which is that it has to be who you are. So it's hard for you to let somebody go who is working for you and have them leave feeling bad, right? That obviously that doesn't feel good to you. So you're saying, I'm going to stay in contact with them, not necessarily in the interest of bringing them back, maybe sometimes, but just being a good person and just saying, hey, I don't want you to have any bad feelings about how this experience worked. I mean, that is, graduate level lead from the heart, as far as I'm concerned. What I'm saying is that if you have to buy into the premise, and this is the hardest hurdle, and the premise is that people want to work and do good work and make a good contribution, but they want to be supported. They want to know that you care about them and know something about them, and that what you know about them drives your behavior in a certain way. They want to feel safe. They want to know that this is a place where I belong. When those components are there, they have well-being. And the idea that well-being is going to drive performance is a head spinner for most people, because they think, if I take them and try to care about them, they're going to get soft around the middle and take advantage of me and not perform. And what they can't see and have such a hard time believing is that it's just the opposite, that we are hardwired to reciprocate to people who care about us. We want to give back to the people who give to us. So give and give and give some more. And this doesn't mean that you can't set high goals. Like I mean, you're a very caring person, clearly, but you've managed to build some pretty substantial businesses. Did you have a hard time telling people, "Hey, I need to get this done by Friday," or we're having this goal by the end of the year. We need to meet. Like, did you have that problem? I never did.
I never did either, but here's how I navigated it. So a couple of challenges. So I agree with reciprocity and what you're talking about, and they if you're showing them goodwill and you're supporting them, and they want to do that, but that's not everyone. There's another human nature part where collectively I've seen them try to weaponize leadership's intent to create this kind of great developmental employee well-being wellness culture. And so my mantra was always very candid with where you stand and very caring as I did it, and no games. So I wouldn't let it happen when people tried to weaponize, values or any approach around the culture. And when I look at if I'm just looking at ours as a case study, so here we are, 23 years growing from basically nothing to a 9-figure exit and over 500 team members, never one employee lawsuit ever. Um, I knew pretty much every one of the employees, unless they were brand new, and I knew something about their families because I was just generally interested in what they were doing. Again, no employee lawsuit ever, no EEOC claim. That maybe 3 were filed. They didn't, and they never went anywhere. Everybody acted like the CEO of their own role, and they were. It was like they were all on a bunch of teams within this giant team, loving winning the game and driving it. And so everything was about this foundation of here's how you create value for the organization individually and your team. If you're a leader, I had 64 different leaders, spent most of my time developing them. Never had any problem with this drive towards better performance, and they were running towards it. And I think it was because candid, caring, no games. I would not give any emotional energy to games because they just balloon out of control. I used to say, and it's probably not the best way to describe it, but I said, the more you do that, it opens up what I affectionately call the bottomless pit of emotional need. We're not going to do that. It's not healthy for the organization. It's not healthy for any individual. But that's how I did it. Does that make sense? Are we kind of aligned here?
I never had anybody try to weaponize what I was doing. With one exception, I had somebody who realized that, you know, that I was always very grateful for performance and expressed it. And so in her mind, because her performance, because she was set up in a situation that enabled it, tied to also her having some remarkable skills. It was the perfect world. Her performance was better than just about everybody's. And so she felt that she deserved much more attention and much more, adulation at the expense of other people. And I just had ultimately said that that's not how this is going to work. That not only can't you be, a bottomless pit, as you sort of inferred, but really it's a culture about all of us. And so you're contributing to the team as much as you're contributing to your own personal success. So we're not going to focus on stars because I lean so much into collaboration and cooperation and having each other's backs. So suddenly if you feel like you're the star and you're the one who deserves everything, all the rewards, you're doing that at the expense of everyone else, and that's going to destroy what I'm trying to build here. So that's misalignment. So I didn't have too much of that.
To that point, you and I wouldn't have that problem. I didn't have much of it either because the no games part, I just wouldn't let it happen. But in working with a lot of other organizations where leaders are trying to make their teams happy and they know it, I'm watching team members weaponize it and use it against them. It's an excuse for poor performance, low accountability, whatever that is, and other things that go in there.
It's interesting because I don't think I ever used the word happiness. That wasn't my goal. I wasn't ever trying to make people happy. What I was trying to do was to identify what are their needs and support them in their needs. So, for example, um, if I set up a system, this is in the I spent the last part of my career in like the brokerage side of stocks and bonds and all that kind of stuff. But I was on the retail banking side for quite some time, and I ran a large network of retail bank branches. And you had different levels of expertise at the assistant manager level, like people just becoming an assistant manager and looking up and like, I don't know anything about what I'm doing, to people who were fully experienced in every dimension of the business and were ready to be promoted. And so what I set up was like, let's clarify where you are. So rather than just have this be ambiguous, I'm going to say, based on what I can see and based on what I know you know and what your talents are right now, not just talents, but knowledge, experience, capability, that you're going to be an A or B or a C. And then if you get to a C, I'm going to consider you eligible to be a manager. So the next time a manager opening comes up, I'm only going to interview the C. So the progression is clear. You want to go from an A to a B, B to a C, C to manager, if that's what you want. Not everybody wants to be. Some people just want to be a B. They want to get to, I want to understand enough about the business so that I can be competent and do this job for a long time. Some people want my job or, even bigger jobs that like, but very rarely do you get somebody who, has dreams of something that's beyond what you're capable of supporting them on. So I say, okay, so what is it that you want to do? So you have a plan for the A's, you have a specific plan for the B's and the C's. And I would meet with them regularly. I'd bring all the A's together and all the B's together and all the C's together. And then, if we promote them, people begin to see that there was a payoff for all this. Like if you work Mark's system, but it was all tailored to them. So they knew that I knew what it was that they were aspiring to do. So growth happens to be one of the greatest drivers of engagement, but it's number two driver of well-being. Am I growing? Am I learning? Whatever job you have, even if you're going to do the same job for 25 years, I need to keep learning something new. And so by doing this and investing in people and congratulating them when they went from an A to a B and B to a C and making a big deal about it, they knew that I was very much part of their journey, like almost driving their journey, that they had somebody who was their advocate that was trying to get them there. And it happened, people were like, if they wanted to be a C, they were trying to get there as fast as possible. So the performance was exceptional. People were just doing amazing things. And then other regions, bank regions started plucking my people off, calling them up and saying, hey, could you come up here? And we have a great opportunity for you. And people were willing to move in certain circumstances. But I had this farm of talented, motivated people who were just kept filling it. And we were like number one for 3 consecutive years. And the president of the bank called me up and said, like, you're performing in a way that nobody else is performing. Like there's no region in 4,000 bank branches like yours. What are you doing? And I go, I love my people, and I'm also very demanding. And that's the combination. And I'm sure you're that way. It's like my feeling was, if I'm going to support you in this way, if I'm going to get to know you and really truly understand what motivates you and support you in every possible way that I can, and I'm going to teach you and coach you and share all of my knowledge. I'm not going to say, well, it took me 5 years to learn it, so you spend the same 5 years. Like, why would I want to waste their time if I can teach them what I've already learned? So I'm accelerating their knowledge. People are seeing that they're growing. You get to a point where you say, well, we shouldn't be aiming for what everybody else is aiming for, as long as you're rewarding them, right? It would be exploitive if you just said, we need to keep going higher and higher and higher if there's nothing in it for them. But if they're being rewarded on every level for going higher and higher, let's set goals that are higher than everybody else's because we're capable. And I think that was the big stretch that people couldn't believe that I was doing. We had just, these numbers won't make any sense, but the company came and said that they wanted each branch to come up with somewhere around $7,500. This doesn't mean anything. It was a modified P&L, but the number was the number for 4,000 branches. We need you to come in at $7,500 a month net profit. And it wasn't real money, but it was the way that they got compensated. So I took my team away on a retreat and I said, the company wants to do 7,500. What do we want to do? And they were like, 7,501. And I go, aha, you know, we're not gonna, you need to be a little more ambitious than that. And they wouldn't be because they didn't know what was in it. They thought, human nature, they don't want to set a goal that's beyond what the company is asking. Why would you do that? So I said, I want to set a target of 14,000. And they, like they were, you could see there was like almost a ready for a mutiny. And I built this model for them and gave them an Excel spreadsheet. And I said, go back and just play with this and see what you need to do to get to 14,000. And people were like, I don't have to do that much more. I'm sort of surprised. But they were being paid off of this. So the higher that number went that they were capable, the better they were going to be paid. And they were all very excited. So the first month, January, after we had our retreat, we started the year, the average, what we call the net income per FTE, so net income per full-time employee, it was $6,450. So the company didn't get off to a good start. We were at 21,000 and they were getting paid for it. And they were and everyone of course was blown away, but it was setting people's minds that they had the capability of achieving at a level that they never could have imagined if they would just take the time to think about it. And also to know that they had the talent because I was training them and coaching them and reinforcing everything that they knew so that they were masters at what they were doing. And and I would go into other groups around the country and I'll, I shouldn't say this, but I just was like, this is some of the most average talent that I would be repelled by it because no one was making an investment. It was just like, okay, you have this job, go do the job, and I'll check in with you Friday and see how you're doing, instead of deeply investing in people the way that you did and the way that I did. And it's much more satisfying to see people just soar and perform at those levels. So the return on investment is profound. Like you've made a lot of money in your businesses, obviously. Um, the things that I think back on are the emails and calls that I get from people saying, you really changed my life. And I'm in a position now where this happens all the time, even all these years later, where people are just saying, I'm reminded of something you said to me and something you did for me that helped me and influenced me. And I think, if this is a short life we have, get some satisfaction out of it in terms of how you can impact other people's lives, not just your own.
Yeah, 100%. And I get streams of that all the time. I love it. I love watching leaders that I worked with that went on to run, bigger things, and the successes in their lives. It's amazing. And I think that that's my legacy, if there is. And I feel like at 64, I'm in the legacy part of my life. So everything I do is about that, whether it's with businesses, for profit, nonprofit, families. You said something earlier that just really nailed it. It's like, this has to be who you are. And for leaders that have been sort of command and control and just, hard driving on numbers and people are just commodities and, blanks on a spreadsheet, if you will, and everybody, hit their numbers and all the right stuff will happen. Those that aren't leading this way that want to because they're starting to see the value in it, what are the first couple of steps they can take to get on the path to making this who they are? I mean, I can just sense it's totally 100% who you are. You can instantly answer, again, thousands of nuanced ways to deal with certain situations to keep on the path. They can't, they haven't been doing it as of now. What are a couple of steps to get them moving in that direction?
I think that the two that come to mind, one I'll start with because you alluded to it in our pre-conversation, but you've got to understand who you are first before you can lead. I just was asked to come and speak in Tennessee to all of um, the heads of their key agencies. So these are the most senior people, a lot of them reporting into the governor of Tennessee. And I could have done a whole bunch. They wanted a well-being meeting. And so I spoke, but then I came back and did this workshop. And what we did was we went through, which happens to be the first two chapters of my book, which is that if you know thyself and to understand who you are and what motivates you and how your beliefs were shaped and what are the triggers, . So, I'll give you an example. Um, I had, my father would tell me that, I would never amount to anything, and there were a million different ways he expressed that, but that was the, that I had no value and worth, and so and then he kicked me out of the house with no money and no support, and so that was hard, but I kind of decided that graduating from college was a binary experience, like, if I didn't, that I would prove him right. I would be the abject failure he predicted I would be. So by hook or by crook, I was gonna graduate from college because I wasn't gonna live with what he was trying to tell me. Even though I'm not living with him anymore, this ghost is carrying me. And I really was, probably close to 50 before I realized that my hard work ethic was largely driven by trying to prove to this guy who wasn't even in my life. And frankly, he died when I was like 38. So here he is still driving my behavior. Here, see this dad, see this dad, see this dad. And I probably would have been just as motivated because that's how I'm wired. But it's a toxic thing to like never be happy or satisfied with what you're accomplishing and I think that's what I got from him. Everything that I did as a child was like worthy of praise. And instead it was like, that's not good enough, fast enough, smart enough, whatever. So understanding that and being able to pull that out and having a false motivation changed my life. It's like, okay, I'm willing to do this because I want to, not because I'm trying to prove to anyone. But we all have these kinds of things. So I won't spend too much time with it, except to say that spend time figuring out, like, think through. Parents go through a divorce. I mean, you obviously had some very, very difficult situations. It influences you, it influences your behavior. And you have to say, hey, the behaviors that I chose or practices that I chose in response to this helped me get out of it, helped me navigate 12 schools in 13 years, or parents who got divorced, or an alcoholic parent, or financial problems, or all those different things that could have happened, a death in the family, all these kinds of things that impact us. We make decisions unconsciously on how we're going to pivot to help us succeed and endure them. But at some point, you have to go, do I need to keep doing that? I've gotten past that. So, I need those behaviors. So, it's a deeper understanding of who you are. I would really spend time and just think about how I'm wired and what are the things that motivate me. And by the way, ask yourself the question: do I really like leading people? I actually put this in the book, which is to say, if you don't love people, if you don't really love seeing other people thrive and perform, if you're threatened by that, or it doesn't matter to you, and we know that, the larger percentage of the population is singularly focused on whatever is going on for them. So you put somebody like that into a leadership role, they're going to continue to be singularly focused on them. So they're not going to think about how are my actions influencing other people, and whether or not somebody's getting a win-win out of the relationship that you have with them. So those people should think about, maybe I don't want to continue in leadership. So that would be the first one. The second one is, remember the assistant managers. So they didn't report to me, and they were all over. I mean, geographically, I had a big territory. But what I would do is I would schedule twice a year meetings with them individually. And I would walk into the branch, and everybody knew who I was. And they go, "Oh, are you here to see the manager?" And I go, "Nope, it's not who I'm here to see today." That doesn't mean that I wouldn't say hello to the manager and ignore them. But I wanted everybody to understand that who I'm here to see is the assistant manager, because I'm helping them today. Like, that's what this is about. So sometimes I would see two in one, because if you don't want to be inefficient. But the idea was, I'm here to see the assistant managers. And it was really just, tell me what's going on with you. Tell me what's going on in your life. Tell me how are things, what would you like to learn? What are the challenges? Where do you want to go next? Like, let's build our 6-month plan and let me help you get there. But the thing was, the plan was great. But what mattered to them was that I would fly or get into a car or find myself in their branch, not having them come to me, but me coming to them to say, how can I help you? So I think if you just sat down with people and said, just what do you want? Why are you working? Is it all for money? What are the things, what are the challenges that you have? Like, I mean, just knowing that they've got little kids at home. Like I used to, I gave people very high expectations, but what I didn't do was to tell them when they needed to do it or how they needed to do it. I gave them all sorts of expertise to say, this is kind of what we think is the optimal way. These people are running big businesses, major bank branches. I told them, I don't care when you come in. I don't care when you go home. I just want you to meet these goals. So you want to go coach your kids' little league team? I have no problem with it. And the reason is that, and they love that. They love that freedom. They love that autonomy. But the people go, well, why would you do that? Because they're just going to take advantage of you. And I'm like, no, if the manager's out of the branch all day long doing fun stuff, right? The rest of their employees are going to turn on them saying, why aren't you here helping us doing your job? So there's accountabilities that I don't need to be responsible for. But the freedom to say, I'll give you an example. I had this brief period of time where the bank that I was working for failed, and I didn't want to move my family, and I ended up taking a job outside of the business, a totally different industry. And the guy who owned the company was the son of the founder of the business. The father had died, and I don't know what he just was a micromanager. And so in my contract, he said, "I'm expecting you to work 10 hours a day." Well, I'm the kind of guy who was not limited to 10 hours a day. So that wasn't going to be a problem for me. But what he didn't understand was that if he just said, these are the expectations, that I would have put in those 10 hours. But the difference is that at 8, they start becoming mine. In his mind, I'll make sure I explain this. In his mind, they're all his until 10. So in other words, if I work 11 hours in his system, I'm only investing an additional hour of my discretionary effort. When the reality was I was giving 3 hours of additional discretionary effort. So if I wanted to contribute at a higher level, he was negating 2 of those hours. He was trying to do it to make sure that I don't know what, like skated. That was just his mentality, but exists in business, right? So it's like, don't handcuff people. Teach them, train them, coach them, tell them what they're expected to do, hold them accountable, and then support them as best as you possibly can. That's the formula.
Yeah, I've always thought, everyone I've ever employed, I view this as we're all working together. The company's a value creation machine. We all have our part to play in this, and we want to do it well. I want to do it well, and that their lives, every one of them, is just as important to them as mine is to me. And keeping that front and center kind of helped me navigate a lot of it. And I don't know what it'd be like for everyone on average, but if you just think about leaders, what percentage of leaders are really strong when it comes to self and social awareness and regulation? And there's a lot of personality assessments out there that virtually every leader takes, but I don't see significant development around that self and social awareness and regulation. I mean, what percentage of leaders, in your view, are just on average, just pick the United States, are really strong around that self awareness piece?
Very small, very small, I couldn't give you a number, but it's clearly small. No one's ever asked me this question before, but my instinct tells me, knowing how I got there, and how I assume you got there, is that you have to do a lot of work on yourself. You really have to dive deeply into, the pains, the hurts, the disappointments, the the failures, the successes, the whole package, and really understand yourself in a way that um, so I've been through so much in my life that if somebody throws me a big curve, like if there were, I don't, I'm looking for some wood here to knock on. I don't want a problem. But if there were a problem, I I I have the ability. I just had a root canal, and the doctor told me, he goes, "This is gonna be a nightmare because you've got 2 different routes and two different sides. He goes, it's going to take me probably an hour and a half and you probably won't enjoy it. And I'm like, enjoy it. Like, it's the worst thing for me to go to, I mean, for me personally, going to the dentist is the worst thing in the world. So a root canal is off limits. And, he started and I just went away and I literally just closed my eyes and just like started meditating. And he goes, you're the best patient I've ever had. And I was like, I didn't really want to be there for you. Like, I didn't want to, like, I didn't want to experience every moment of that. And so I just sort of allowed myself to just focus on something entirely different and just allow the process to happen. And so there's this belief that I'm going to walk out of here and it's all going to be fine. And I'm going to be able to solve the problem, whatever this is. This isn't what I would want, but how do we navigate it? And by the way, navigate it. Like, I got the problem in front of me. I'm not going to pretend that it's not there. I wonder if it'll go away. If I go to sleep tomorrow, hopefully it'll be. No, it's like, okay, it's here. We got to deal with it. Let's deal with it. And that takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of commitment. And I think in my experience, and I wonder if this is true for you, that this, not everybody's up for it. Not everybody wants to make that investment. I'll give you an example. There's a professor at the London Business School. She used to teach at Harvard. Truly brilliant person. Her name is Herminia Ibarra. But if you listen to my podcast, she literally her student was Amy Edmondson, who's like psychological safety genius. And my most popular number one and number two podcasts are Amy Edmondson. And my number three and number four are Herminia Ibarra. So these are two of the most brilliant people, and obviously people figured it out. But Herminia was telling me that she's teaching these executives. Like, so these are maybe 45-year-old guys, 50-year-old executives who are getting ready to go into senior roles, and they're at Harvard or at London Business School, rather, getting their executive MBAs. And the way they do it is all sort of remote, but they come in once a year during the summer and spend 2 or 3 weeks or something. And so there's an immersion. So she says to them, she said, the advice that I'm going to give you is that if you really want to grow as a leader, I mean, this is directly relevant to what you're asking me. She said, if you want to grow as a leader, raise your hand for every opportunity to do something you're not good at. Take the discomfort, I have no idea what I'm doing here. Let your ego suffer and take the opportunities to do the work that other people wouldn't take. So if it's a special project, even if it's a job, like, you could take an opportunity to go in and do something that you wouldn't do. Go do that. Because her whole premise is, and she's written a book about this, is that we don't learn from books about leadership. We learn from our experience in leading people and figuring out, did that work well or not work well? And we recalibrate. So that's where she's coming from. So she said, so then they come back and I go, well, tell me what you're doing. And she said, it's obvious that 90% of the people in the room go back and spend 80% of the time of their day doing the things that they know they're already good at and avoiding all the things that they know they're not good at. And if people can get beyond that hurdle. So in my career, I took everything anybody ever asked me. Like, I had a job at 27 years old where they go, we don't know if you'll have a job if you don't make this work. Like, we don't know what we're going to do with you. Would you like it? And I'm like, yeah, I'll take it. It was like, because it was this challenge. And I think deep down, I understood that I know myself well enough to know that I'm going to figure this out. But I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I had no idea. I had no right even having this opportunity, but people believed that I could do it. And so I'm like, okay, I'll take that opportunity. And so I had this quantum leap in expertise and experience by the time I was 29. And then you look back 25 years ago and you go, wait a minute, what are those people that were around me? Where are they today? And a lot of them are still doing exactly what they were doing 25 years ago. And it's because they made the decision every day to lean into what they were good at versus putting themselves into situations where they would learn something and grow. And so if you're not willing to take a little bit of pain and take a little ambiguity and uncertainty, it's almost fixed against you that you're ever going to get where you really need to.
I think we need to culturally, I'll just speak for the United States, but it's probably a lot of the rest of the world too. Culturally, understand that all the value in the world and all the opportunity really is going to be in the struggle. And if you want to develop, you have to put work in. You can call it whatever you want. If you get to work a little bit, work hard, micro struggle, significant struggle, even unhealthy struggles, there's value to come out of it. I wouldn't change anything about my childhood or any experiences because it's formed who I am, and I like how I see the world and how I continue to grow. But one of the I'm CEO currently of two companies. One of them is called Dinner Table, and we have over 40,000 parents in our community, 67 countries. Been running at this about 20 months now. I want to get to millions. I personally lead hundreds of families in my in-person and virtual communities. We've got coaches leading other communities. And one of the things we talk about is the value of struggle. And initially, a lot of them say struggle is bad. Struggle is actually really good, and continuing to develop emotionally, mentally, spiritually, physically, like all of that. We feel better when we do that. And those that run from struggle lean into what they do well, but not grow at all. They start to, I don't know, their well being does not continue to improve. And for me, my most important internal number that I think about is fulfillment. And the more I'm growing, I can't be happy all the time, and my physical health isn't the best all the time for different reasons. But every year, my fulfillment goes up because I lean in to grow. And one of the biggest parts of my growth is having conversations with people like you. I mean, I'm 2 years into my podcast. I've had about 100 amazing guests now, and this is the best part, one of the best parts of my personal development program. So maybe talk about that, the value of struggle and going through. You've kind of touched on it now, but why are we running away from it culturally? And we should lean into it. Everything is there.
It's painful. That's the answer. It's painful. Who wants that? I mean, I get it. The thing is that for both of us, and I didn't know this before we started speaking, but you're not supposed to get kicked out of your house when you're 17, 18 years old and not have support and love and care and thoughtful direction and, the safety of knowing you have a place to go home to and people that care about you. Like you're not supposed to not have that in your life. And so when you don't have that and you have to then figure out how to climb a very tall mountain and like get your life together, um, it you have to believe in yourself, but you also have to be willing to go, okay, one step at a time. We're gonna build a routine and we're gonna live the routine until we get where we're gonna get to, and we're gonna live through this pain. And I was capable of doing that at 18 years old. I struggled. I mean, it wasn't like it was, you know, in an instant I turned all this on. I probably should have been kicked out of school the first year. But nevertheless, I figured it out. And so that gave me two things. One was the confidence that throw anything at me and I'll figure it out. But also sort of I know the pain is going to be rewarded. And I think that that's the piece that most people just don't want. So the human nature part of it is like, hey, would you be willing to, you know, I remember, uh, and I think it has a lot to do with my upbringing, but my best friend and I used to run every Sunday for 25 years. And we'd run half marathons, 10Ks. And one day he goes, I'm going to run a marathon. You want to run it with me? And I was like, I can't run a marathon. Like, I don't have that in me. Like, no way. So he went and ran it. I watched it. I still believe that I couldn't do it. And so my son was a All-American water polo player, and he went up to Cal Berkeley, and they required him to stay up there for the whole year. So I wasn't seeing him, and they had a water polo tournament at UCSD near where I went to college, University of California, San Diego, and the one of his big competitors was playing UCSD. UCLA was playing, and they were the number 2 team, and Cal was number 1. And I thought, well, I'm just going to go and get a little, some feeling of connection to my son here by going over there. And so I'm sitting in the stands and this guy walks in. Again, this is another one of these Buddha moments. And because he's got a jacket on, but it was like way overdone, and it was like the classic Leatherman's jacket that you get in high school or college, it's wool and cloth and then leather and all that. And it says the New York City Marathon on it. And the guy's sitting like across from me. I'm like, I can't not look at this. And it was just this nudge. It was like, are you going to take the challenge, or are you going to live with the limited belief that you couldn't do this? So I went home and started looking it up and figuring out and they had a lottery. So you weren't even guaranteed if you wanted to get in. And I got in and I started training. And I was, you're running 26 miles. It's not fun. After a while, you get to mile 20 and you're like, you want this thing over. But when I crossed that line, and I was really sick, but when I crossed that line, I don't know that there was anything more gratifying to me in my life, truly. Like I wouldn't, my marriage, my son, those are probably the only two things that, that could come close to, they would precede it. But from terms of just achievement, because it was, I can do this. I'm actually capable of doing this. And it was always my mind that was telling me. It was always my dad's voice that was saying, on some level, you're not capable, you're not a runner or whatever. And so to be able to triumph over pain it's worth it if you just have the courage to say, I'm going to live with this and I'm going to live with I remember when I was a kid, I went over to caddy at the country club where my dad was a member, and they had a bunch of caddies there. So you get there like at 6 o'clock in the morning or something like that. And you're sitting on the bench and there's a ton of caddies. And so they say, you're going to sit on the bench, come in here and clean clubs. So I go in and clean clubs. I'm with like three of my friends. And so we all start cleaning clubs. And they keep calling names out and calling names out, never us. And so ultimately, the three of us are just sitting there with nothing to do. And the two friends that I was with, they just decided to go after we had cleaned clubs for like 4 or 5 hours. Like they put some time into this. So they ended up leaving. So I'm still sitting on the bench and the guy comes up to me and he goes, I got a loop for you. Come back at 2 o'clock. And so I went back so I'm on the course carrying these two bags with this couple. And I look out in the distance and the two people that are watching me from afar are my two friends, because they could see that I got the reward for paying the dues and being persistent. And I think that's illustrative of there's a lot of upside if you want it. But the thing is that not everybody wants it. A lot of people are just content with just sort of getting through life and experiencing, the funner aspects of life after work. And I think that's fine too.
Yeah, and it's fine. And I notice that there's a difference in their energy. Like if they would embrace growth, it would be better. And they start to develop regrets. And a lot of those folks that I know, because I'm getting older, they get more negative as they age. Whereas those that are on a growth path, they get more positive and hopeful and all of it. And the thing that I love, well, one thing I believe is that all beliefs about what we can do are limited, and we need to modify those limiting beliefs. That's what I think. Like every belief, for the most part, is a limiting belief. Like, how do we modify it? And the thing I liked about doing distance events, like you're talking about, is when my body wanted to quit with every fiber, every cell, like we need to stop. This is terrible, but you keep going. It's like we find this new limit where we can go, and it can be.
Or no limit. You're like, wait a minute. I thought that was going to kill me and it didn't. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
And business can be the same. Like, oh my gosh, this is a hot mess. It's going to be terrible, and it's like you're pulling everybody with this giant rope behind you to get this thing to be stable and then start to thrive. It's just like running an ultra marathon or doing an Ironman or any of that kind of stuff. Once you do it a few times, you alluded to it earlier, you start to, at least I think you start to trust that when I do the work, the harder it gets, the reward's going to be even bigger. I've been through this a few times now. I trust that I can figure it out and do it. And I think it takes a lot of folks a while to to even get started and believe it, because you have to struggle a lot to get to where you trust your ability to get through struggle.
I have to be careful in telling this story, but there's somebody that I used to know, and they were a very senior person in an organization. And so everybody knew that person. Like they were their senior boss. That person was their most senior boss, if you will. And he was a gregarious person. And so everybody, like people knew him and liked him and that kind of a thing. So he ends up leaving the bank, and then the bank, of course, got sold, right? And so now we'll call him Bill. So Bill was somebody big in the organization, but now he's Bill because the organization is there. And so um, he sort of was surprised by what I've been able to do since I left. And like assuming that it was all really easy and you just, all of a sudden just books fly out of you and you just type like a court reporter and, all, you know, and so he said, well, I don't understand because I've gone out to the people that we used to work with and asked them, I'll help you, do some work, coaching, that kind of a thing. And they didn't come to me like, and I'm Bill, like, how could that happen? And I don't think he understood that you were Bill because the job made you Bill. Right? You're William now. Like you're a different person and that people they're going to look to you of your, of what you can give to them now, as opposed to what you can give to them when you're their boss. And so what he wasn't willing to do was to do the hard work. I mean, what I'm advocating and everything we're talking about is still a Sisyphus kind of move. Like I push it up and then I get up the next day and I find people going, well, I don't know if that's going to work. And, so I've had a lot of resistance and I could have quit this a long time ago, but I fundamentally believe what I'm saying. Like I'm so certain of it that it's like, okay, I'm just here to win people over. That's apparently what this is going to take. So that's what I'm here to do. Not everybody they just want the reward. They just want the glory. So now I've written two best-selling books and, and people know who I am and I've built up a good social media following and I write articles and, so, but that was work, man. That was, and am I a writer? Can I write this? Is this make sense? Like you're going through all of that and you're working through all of that. It, if you're not willing to do that, you're never going to get the rewards. And I think that's why so few people do it.
Yeah. I go back to how we feel going through life, at least to me, is everything. And so what goes into that, and the whole purpose of this podcast, what's the right balance of material, emotional, and spiritual value creation? And spiritual for me is about connectedness at its foundation. And that can mean all kinds of things, self, family, God, whatever you want it to be, but everybody gets their own balance going through. And so the reward for me is growth in those areas and figuring out the balance. And so today I'm working more than I ever have. I hardly have any minutes off, and I love that I get to do all the things that I do. I'm growing faster than ever. I feel like every year that goes by, I grew more personally than I did the 3 years prior. And I'd like to keep that going. That's so exciting. And if we could I think if more people could see that this personal growth path is the way to feeling better going through life, I think they would benefit a lot from it rather than running from struggle.
We have a society that rewards, stardom and doesn't reward struggle. So, when we see, I'll give you an example. It's something that I was really surprised at. They had the Grammys on a few weeks ago, the awards for the best, musicians and music and so forth. And they had I forget what they call it, the best new artist. And so I heard this story that said that they had like 6 or 7 people that were nominated for best new artist. And the people that were nominated all had like 14, 15 years of experience of trying to make a name for themselves. And now they have their album out that is succeeding and they're being considered best new artist. So you think of somebody who's 23 years old coming out of nowhere. They're not coming out of nowhere. And that, I think it was I forget the book that pointed this out, but that the Beatles had spent 10 years playing together, writing songs, figuring out which ones were good, figuring out their harmonies and how they would play together before they ever came to America in 1964. So we think they're getting on a plane, they're coming over and they're playing for the first time. That wasn't the way it worked at all. People are putting in Olivia Dean, who won the best new artist, 15 years she's been working to get recognition. And I think if that story got told more often, then people would go, okay, that's what I have to do to get there. I'm going to not have a lot of recognition and fame for a while, but if I work really hard, I'll get there. As opposed to thinking that it's going to come. And the Bill story is somebody who just thought, I just wake up and I'm Bill and people are going to come to me and flock to me because I'm Bill. And it's like, sadly, it's just not the way it works.
Yeah, there's always an origin story. Even most of the successful companies out there, there might have been 2 or 3 iterations before the 7-year story to get to where they got noticed. So maybe we should call in the music industry, the awards, the most recently finally recognized artist.
Right?
Right? That's
Yeah.
what we should call it.
Well, there was an artist, there was a television star. I'm trying to think of her name, but she was. This goes back probably 20 years, maybe 15 years ago. But she was an actress who got named, like, won the best new television celeb, artist, basically best new TV star, and she got up there and said, I'm an overnight success after 20 years. So Holland Taylor, and she's gone on to be in a million different sitcoms and so forth. But the point she was making was, you know, don't be treating me like, I'm brand new here. I've been working on my craft for 20 years before I got the recognition. And if you think about it logically, who has talent that, you know, that's that spectacular that they don't have to refine or develop or learn more from, right? You have raw talent when you're 20, but if you're going to be any kind of an artist, by the time you're 40, you're probably infinitely more refined in terms of your understanding of your craft and your abilities and your confidence and all those dimensions. So I think if we just sort of expect that, I think if, I've thought about this, that we should tell people that your career is a journey and you're going to make mistakes and you're going to learn things. But if you want to get here, this is what people here have done. This is how they've gotten there. They've put themselves in discomfort. They've taken on challenges that most people wouldn't want. They've lived with this uncertainty of whether they're going to be able to do it. They've invested in themselves by getting to fully understand who they are. They've worked on their limitations. They've solicited people's opinions on how they could do better. They've worked hard to do those kinds of things. They've done the work, is the point. So don't judge the brushstrokes. I think this is, people are so focused on today that they can't see where they're going to go. So your point about these people that are, 25 years into a career and they're still on the same point and they're bitter and angry, is because they didn't take the chances. They didn't have the courage and they know it. And now they're stuck and they know that they haven't fulfilled what they could have fulfilled, that they've been able to, put themselves into a little bit of discomfort. It's hard, but that's how success happens.
And it's never too late to start, I think, for anyone. And I work with a lot of high school kids around the virtues of entrepreneurship, usually smaller groups, up to 50 at most. And a lot of kids would say, and have said to me, I just want to have what you have and be where you're at. And I say,
Yeah,
well,
who doesn't, right? Yeah.
don't you mean you want to earn that? Because I'm currently on my 46-year overnight success story and I'm still going. And like really love the journey and the process and who you're becoming. And I wish we would not celebrate celebrities and all of that. I wish we would celebrate who people are. I think that's
agree.
how it goes. You and I could
completely.
spend another entire podcast or two. Just I'd love at some point to dig into your motivators when you were a kid and how you came out of that, because ours are similar situations, but my motivators were in a totally different place. That'd be an amazing conversation. Um, and hopefully you'll come back someday so we can do that. And finishing this up, are there any final thoughts that you have for our listeners out there, Mark?
Two things I think, and we've talked about both of them. One is just if you lead people and you can't get excited about seeing other people thrive and perform and achieve and really become who they are, because I think the orientation of being a leader, we should call them coaches, is really what we should call them. Because if you're a coach, you're not jumping in the last minute to make the free throws. You're telling your team, go out there and win the game, but you're preparing them and you're teaching them to do that. And if you win, you get the satisfaction of knowing that you developed those players so that they could do that. That's a different orientation than I'm taking this job as a leader in order to get more status, more pay, and, to advance myself in my career. So I'm saying go figure out something else to do if you can't get to the other side of it, because we need more people that think like a coach, not like this is just about me. And the other is just get over the hurdle of understanding that work has always been sort of a win-lose. It's always been, we get to run the show here because we're the boss. And if you can look at it from a win-win point of view, and you can say that we know directly that employee well-being drives performance and greater performance, then it's really in your best interest to support and care about the people that you have. And again, if you can't get beyond that, then leadership isn't for you, because that's really where we're headed. This has to be the future. And we're all at a different place pre-COVID, where we look at our life very differently. And we're saying things have changed. And I realize life is short and I want fulfillment. And I'm not going to work somewhere where I'm not getting it. And I'm not going to work for somebody who won't give it to me individually as a manager. So the challenges of becoming a better leader. And by the way, you know, we have massive uncertainty about AI right now and what it's going to do. Some people are saying, oh, it's overblown. But what if it isn't? What if we get into this where CEOs are saying this is the tool that we can use to lop off 25% of our employees and we're going to make more money this way? And now you're going to disenfranchise all these people. Or you say, we're going to keep these people, but we're going to have to teach them different things. We're heading into what I think could be one massively uncertain period in our history. And how do you help people navigate that? If you're only thinking about your own, how do you navigate it, and you're not helping your own people navigate it, your company's not going to succeed unless you completely believe that AI is going to replace all your people. And I'm not in that camp. I just don't believe it. But if you come into it thinking I'm going to turn these people loose as soon as it does, that people are never going to forget it. So you have to operate as if these people are going to be around. And even if they kind of like going back to full circle with you, it's like if you're thinking about these people, you're going to support them as best as you can, not knowing what their future is going to be. That's the best you can do, right? If the company ends up because technology allows it, but you've helped those people get to a point where they're not like, how come no one told me and I wasn't prepared and I don't have any other skills and now what am I going to do? Like if you're investing in people, that's kind of your job. That's really your responsibility, is to help people so they can go, I didn't want to get laid off here, but thank you for what you did to help me. Like that's the best outcome. That's a good one.
Yeah. And that's a whole other podcast that we could do as well,
I
talking
know. I know.
the
Sorry I went
impact of
there, but
AI.
it's
No,
definitely
I think
on my mind.
it's a big conversation. I'm having it with all the CEOs that I coach. If our listeners want to learn more about your work or connect with you, how can they do that, Mark?
MarkCCrowley.com. I'm Mark C. Crowley on LinkedIn. I'm Mark C. Crowley on Twitter, and obviously Amazon for my books. But there's another Mark Crowley out there. So when I wrote Lead from the Heart the first time 15 years ago, I had to add the C. So that's why it's Mark C. Crowley.
That's perfect. And thanks for taking the time. I've really enjoyed this conversation.
I love the conversation. Thank you for having me, Lee, and best of success. Not that you need any best wishes from me.
No, thank you. I appreciate it though. And this has been the Show Your Value podcast. If you got some value out of today's episode, I certainly did. Please like and subscribe. Until next time, show your value to the world.